His very first foray into politics to become leader of the Progressive Conservative Party brought him a bitter loss. He channeled that bitterness into another leadership run 7 years later. That time, he won handily and renewed the Progressive Conservative Party of Canada with the largest majority in Canadian history at the time. Brian Mulroney created deep loyalties with those around him in unifying the party. Some of those loyalties were later tested and lost. Mulroney came from the small town of Baie-Comeau on the north shore of the St. Lawrence River. Remote and isolated, he grew up in an Irish Catholic family, the son of an electrician at the local paper mill. But his ordinary upbringing was quickly overtaken by his extraordinary life. A close friendship with then U.S. President Ronald Reagan, what many saw as an attempt to change the relationship between Canada and the United States, and a first step towards a free trade agreement between the two countries, something Mulroney had initially opposed. In fact, free trade became the center point of Mulroney's pivotal second federal election in 1988.
Our message is clear. Canada is open for business again.
Bitterly fought, it became about Canadian patriotism.
You've sold us out. I happen to believe that once you...
Mr. Turner, just one second.
Once any
you
nation...
do not have a monopoly on patriotism. And I resent the fact that your implication that only you are a Canadian.
Mulroney won his second majority, leaving him lots of room to move forward with bold and potentially controversial ideas, including bringing in the much-disliked GST.
We are doing it because it is right for Canada. It must be done.
As a son of La Belle Province, Mulroney also made promises to recognize Quebec as a distinct society, and he sought to complete something his predecessor and political nemesis Pierre Trudeau failed to do: attempt to win Quebec's signature on Canada's repatriated constitution. That kicked off years of negotiations with the provinces, starting with the Meech Lake Accord. But as it moved towards ratification, some provincial governments had now changed and were suddenly no longer on board.
I believe it's about time that you allow the Aboriginal people to be heard.
A one-day meeting turned into a week-long, last-ditch effort to save the agreement that ultimately failed.
It's a sad day for Canada. This was all about Canada, about the unity of our country.
The disappointment turned to anger from some conservative Quebec MPs who left to form the Bloc Québécois, including one of Mulroney's close friends, Lucien Bouchard. Mulroney never forgave him. And Western Canadians, too, began to feel left out, leading Preston Manning to create the Reform Party, both leading to damaging splits within the Conservative movement down the road. Mulroney's second attempt to get Quebec to sign on to the Constitution came in the form of the Charlottetown Accord. It also failed in 1992 after being put to a referendum. It was the end of a quarter century of constitutional reform in this country, and it was more fodder for those who simply were ready to move on from the Mulroney era. Yet, he still had work to do.
If there are not fundamental changes in South Africa, we are prepared to invoke total sanctions against that country and its repressive regime.
Pressuring international partners to denounce the apartheid in South Africa and free Nelson Mandela. It won Mulroney worldwide praise and a visit from a grateful and free Mandela just months after his release. Mulroney signed the Acid Rain Accord with the United States in 1991, earning him kudos from environmentalists. But Canada had wearied of Mulroney after a turbulent 9 years, and he left politics in 1993.
I always tried to do what I thought would be right for Canada in the long term, not what could be politically popular in the short term.
What followed was the start of a long Liberal reign. His successor, Kim Campbell, managed to win only 2 seats. His years after politics were marked with some embarrassing legal battles, including questions about his relationship with the German businessman Karl-Heinz Schreiber, resulting in an inquiry. Mulroney did admit to accepting $250,000 from Schreiber for consulting.
I was fighting for my life and the honor of my family.
The inquiry found the former Prime Minister's dealings with Schreiber were inappropriate and not ethical. Mulroney called it the worst mistake of his life and set to rebuild his reputation. Conservatives once again sought his counsel or his blessing, and the Liberals' successor to his old foe, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, counted on his advice during negotiations around NAFTA 2.0. Even in the moments when Mulroney knew he was strongly disliked by many Canadians for his decisions, he believed strongly in why he was doing it.
In the fullness of time, history and a more reflective nation will tell us whether our hopes for the ultimate success of these policies were in fact realized.
Mulroney marked the history of this country time and time again, and now in his passing, Canadians may reflect on just how much he gave and how much he changed their country. Rosemary Barton, CBC News, Ottawa.